Good morning. I don't know if you've ever been put into a scenario like the one I'm about to describe, but one of the most irking questions to ever be asked is, what gives you the right to doubt what I'm saying here? What gives you the right? It's like somebody immediately confronting your authority on whatever it is you're talking about. I was a stock clerk for Publix grocery store a couple of years ago, and up came a conversation with one of my fellow stock clerks about the authority of Christ. He was a Christian, he was a believer, but he came from a different faith background than myself, and we got to talking about who we believed Christ was today. More than just a good example, he was an authoritative figure meant to put his mark on all of history, to be seen as such, an authoritative figure. We somewhat agreed on that premise, but the way we carried it into our own faiths looked a little different. I was putting the can of tomatoes on the shelf when he's blocking right beside me, and we're going down the line so that all the grocery items, their labels face forward. And I get finished talking about Colossians, which will be there in just a second. I get finished talking about my interpretation of Colossians, when he's like, "What gives you the right to interpret it that way?" Now, a couple of years ago, I was a young guy, okay? And I didn't respond with patience. It was more of, well, Christ gives me that right to land on the interpretation that I do. I failed to drive home the point that was the most important, though. And it's not what gives us the right, but who gives us the right. If you would open your Bibles to 1 Peter, we're going to address that question as we begin to reflect on the emblems that we're very familiar with. We're going to talk about the kind of who gives us the right to declare our salvation in our place with God. It's the kind of who that deliberately chose you. I don't know if you've tried this practice, but in just a second, I really hope that you read your name in the following chapter, in the following passage, because it's there. Let's start in verse 9 of chapter 2, 1 Peter chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. Who gives us the right to declare our relationship with God today? The same who that looked at you and said, "You're mine. I'm dying for you. I died for you. Would you go to Colossians now? I'm starting in chapter 1 with verse 15. Who gives us the right? Him being the one that is preeminent. Verse 15, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. So far, it's shaping out to be like this guy's got the right to declare what he wants from his people. Verse 17, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. That's us. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. Who gives us the right? Jesus the Christ, the Lamb. In a moment, we're going to be taking of emblems that we're familiar with, the bread and the cup. Those emblems we know representing the one who has all ultimate right, his body and his blood. Reading on. In verse 21, it gets personal. Because Paul says that you, who were once alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. When I was blocking this aisle 7 with my friend, who I consider a friend, we didn't leave on bad terms. But I was focused on the book, chapter, and the verse that supported my point and could defend my position, rather than pointing that conversation to the who it's all about. He gives me the right to say that I'm now in a place with God that otherwise I would have never had. Because of his blood, because of his body, he chose me to die for. He chose you to die for. And it's that sacrifice that we're about to remember. Thank you.